Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation of a previous lesson from Matthew's 25th chapter. The range we most recently covered was verses 13 through 30. We're going to do 31 all the way till 46. The 25th chapter of Matthew consists of three parables, the first of which is a parable likened to the kingdom. And the analogy of a wedding is in place. So we, the church, are the bride. Yahshua is the bridegroom in the old covenant relationships. Yahweh was the husband. Israel was the wife. And there are 10 virgins, 5 of whom are wise, 5 of whom are foolish. The wise ones are prudent, and they take the preparation to supply their lamps with oil. And while they're slumbering and sleeping, then the midnight comes, and the foolish ones beg the wise ones to share some of their oil, but they only have enough for themselves, so they were not prepared. Then they went out to purchase the oil, but by the time they got back, it was too late. And the master says, I do not know you, so they miss their chance and window. So preparation is key to gaining access to the kingdom. The second of which, now the first one and the one we're going to cover today, the third one, are unique to Matthew's account. The one we already covered, verses 13, and we're going to review it a little bit. 13 through 30 has a similar but not identical version of the same story in Luke's 19th chapter. This one is about the coming of the Son of Man, the second coming, as is indicated in the 13th verse. Watch therefore, because you do not know the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. Even the Son himself did not know. He made plain in the 36th verse of the 24th chapter, but concerning the day and the hour no one knows, nor even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. So part of the incarnation was he sacrificed and surrendered the full extent of his divine attribute of omniscience. He didn't even know the day. Now, no one knows the day or the hour, but we do know the times, we do know the seasons, and we do have the signs which tell us it is near, and we should always be preparing as if he could return in our lifetime, because I can hear his footsteps right around the door. But this, he's compared to a property owner, a homeowner with servants, one of whom he gives 5 talents to, the other whom he gives 2 talents to, and the one of whom he gives 1 talent to, and he allots them in proportion to their ability and trustedness. And the one who has the 5 talents makes 5 more talents. The one who has 2 talents makes 2 more talents. The one who has 1 talent is given back the same. And verse 19, and after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. So they're going to have to answer how they stewarded his resources that he entrusted to him while he was away. And he came back after, an undisclosed amount of time, but certainly enough time for them to have made an investment in a multiplication. And the one with the 5 says, I gained 5 more talents besides the 5 you gave him. Verse 21, and his master said to him, well done, good and trustworthy servant. You are trustworthy over a little. I shall put you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. So this servant had a lot to look forward to. He was faithful. He exceeded the sum of money that had been entrusted to him, and because he was trustworthy in little, he could be trusted with a whole lot more. Luke 16:10, who is faithful in little can be entrusted to be faithful and much, and enter into the joy of the master. He's speaking of salvation. Now the servant who had given 2 talents to had the same return. He returned with 2 more, and he says the same thing. But then we read of a different response. Now, thus far, the master is benevolent and gracious, but we learn a few things about him in his response. The landlord, the homeowner, and the one who had received the 1 talent also came and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And being afraid, I went and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. So this servant was a fearful coward. He did not he was afraid, he didn't want to risk losing the single talent in the exchange of commerce. So what he did was he kept it in safekeeping. He physically buried it and protected it so that he would be able to return the talent to which he came when he became. And it's all rooted in fear because, you know, he gives a character judgment of his own master, which is less than flattering. He calls him a hard man, and the master certainly lives up to that statement when he calls him, "You wicked and lazy servant." And he says, you know, rather than burying it in the ground, you should have invested in the bank where I could have collected interest. Therefore, take away the talent from him and give it to him who possesses 10 talents. For to everyone who possesses more shall be given, and he shall have overflowingly. But with him who does not possess, even what he possesses shall be taken away. Now, this principle can be applied to the principle of personal revelation. Revelation demands a response and a responsibility, a responsible response at want. So you can only advance to greater tiers and greater levels of revelatory information if you make the most, if you are faithful, if you make the most out of the foundation of personal revelation, then you can receive, then you can add to the layers. You can build a pyramid of progressively higher levels. But if you are disobedient to the revelation, and then you cannot be entrusted to have greater tiers, and what you know will be taken away from you, whereas he who has knowledge will add knowledge inexorably and progressively. And throw the worthless servant out into the outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. He's talking about hell. This is the place of outer darkness. Hell is begins with the lake of fire, but it does not end there. Our physical bodies, the hellbound's physical bodies, instantly evaporate in the lake of the fire. Then their disembodied immortal souls linger in the outer darkness in solitude for an eternity, no one to talk to, no one to comfort them. And so this unpleasant vision of hell is going to come in because what he speaks of in the verses 31 through 46 we're about to cover is the judgment. And there are one possible two outcomes. The sheep, they go to heaven, and the goats, they go to hell. And we'll explain more who and why the sheep and the goats are, respectively, who they are. Verse 31, lesson itself, Matthew's 25th chapter. And when the Son of Man comes in his esteem, and all the saints all the sacred angels with him, he shall sit on the throne of his esteem. The term Son of Man features prolifically in both the writings of the major prophets of the exile, Ezekiel and Daniel. In Ezekiel, I think it appears countless numbers of time, but it's a lowercase s and a lowercase m. That was the title that Yahweh gave his prophet to remind him that though he was prison to visions of angelic cherubim and everything else, and all these living creatures and these supernatural beings, he himself was mortal. He was a son of man, and as such he had to be reminded he was a messenger of divinity, but not an angel himself. Then in Daniel 7:13, it is capitalized S, capital S, capital M, Son of Man, Daniel 7:13, and that is a reference to the Messiah. And he refers to himself by that term some 82 times in the gospel, and it is capitalized in messianic. So when he comes in his esteem, he's talking about his second coming, because the first time he came as a babe in a manger, and he came as a lamb, but when he comes in his esteem, he's going to return as a lion, and he's going to be accompanied by an army of angels, a legion of angels, and once he was ascended, he sits on the throne that is his place of proximate power to the throne which his Father sits on in heaven. He is there advocating for us and interceding on our behalf. But the throne of his esteem, now when he comes with esteem, the throne of esteem is from whence he comes and whence he returns. So the same esteem that is there will come with him when he comes, because wherever the king goes, there too is his kingdom. And all the nations shall be gathered before him, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates his sheep from his goats. So it's not just the Jewish nation that is hell, has the opportunity for heaven and hell. It's all the people of all the world, of all the ages, all the nations, every creed, color, nation, and tongue are going to be gathered there at the final day of judgment. And he's going to separate those who are worthy to inhabit eternity in heaven in his proximate presence and in intimate fellowship with him and his Father. And these are, he is the good shepherd, and as such he protects his sheep. He laid down his life for the sheep, and if he hadn't done so, then there would be no opportunity or avenue according to which we could rise and be exalted and ascend to heaven. But the sheep and the goats, now why the sheep and why the goats? Sheep are not morally superior to goats. No one animal is morally superior to any other. Animals do not have moral capacities. They are not endowed with the capacity to sin. But a sheep is docile, and they are gentle, they are nonviolent, they are compliant. They do have a wayward nature, but on the whole, they are easier to domesticate, and they have a humility about them that goats are violent, and you have a lot of times you have to keep them on a rope or a leash, and you have to contain them, because left to their own, if it's not, a sheep can wander in a field, and it responds to the shepherd's voice. But the goat is a violent creature that must be tamed, and they have horns. And in the book of Revelation, we read that the great dragon has either 7 horns, and I think the beast has 10 horns. And he shall put the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. So the Ecclesiastes 3:20, the heart of the wise inclines to the right, the heart of the fools inclines to the left. Left-handedness would have been considered an ancient curse, and of course the right was deemed superior. The right hand was the hand of the covenant, and so the sheep are going to be on the side of the right. This is the side of heaven, but the goats on the left. When he separates them, there's going to be no intermixing or intermingling with the goats, the hell-bound with the heaven-bound sheep. Then the king shall say to those on the right hand, Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. So before any of them were born, before any of them were even an idea in their parents' head, this place was planned for him. Heaven was, in the beginning he created the heavens and the earth. So this was before the foundation of the earth. This also ties into the doctrine of predestination, according to which some are elect and are chosen in the councils of eternity before the foundation of the earth. We who are saints and who are saved were chosen to do that before the plan. And that does not absolve. I'm wary of the extremist interpretation of the doctrine. I do believe the doctrine of predestination is scriptural, but I don't want it to encourage one who reads it of absolving themselves of the personal responsibility to stay saved and to live saved. Once saved, always saved. I personally believe that you can lose your salvation. If you died one day, you might be saved, but if you relapse and forsake the saving knowledge, then the consequences are more devastating, and you're worse off than one who died in their sins and ignorance. This is communicated in passages such as Hebrews 10, 26, 27, and 2 Peter 2, 20, 21. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. These are the virtues of hospitality, to provide food for the hungry, thirsty for the dehydrated, and home for people who are homeless, the ones who have no friends, the ones who are in a place where they do not live and are not belonged and perhaps not accepted. But Christian hospitality and virtue feeds the poor, clothes the naked, gives water to the dehydrated, and welcomes the stranger and makes them feel at home even when they are not at home and everyone else around them is making them feeling unwelcome and unwanted. We have to be the ones to extend the hospitality and say, welcome, you are one of us. was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. So again, the clothing of the naked. What did John the Baptist say? If you have two cloaks and tunics, give one of them to one who has none. In Luke 3:11. So nakedness, shelter is a basic human necessity. Homes and clothing are necessary for our survival. And, sick, when you are sick in the hospital, people tend to stay away from you and they don't make time for you. A Christian should know better, but the way of the world is to avoid. No one likes walking into a hospital. No natural man likes making time or giving up part of their day to visit their sick relative, no matter how much they love them in the hospital. It's just not a pleasant place. But visiting, and prison is a place that is lonely, and the punishment of prison is you are exiled from your loved ones, your family, and your friends. But there are visiting allowances for people in prison where they can have some contact with the outside world. The world that they are living in is, in more places than not, hell on earth. Prison is not a pleasant place, and a lot of Christians have been in prison for no greater crime than their Christian confession. And whether you deserve to be in prison or not, it's always an act of grace and hospitality to visit people in there, whether they deserve it or not. We all make mistakes. Some of us make criminal mistakes, but our love should not stop once someone is exiled in prison. We got to visit them. If someone in your life, a loved one or a friend, is in prison, it's your Christian duty to go out of your way, go in there and visit them. Same thing it is to provide food for the hungry and everything else we read about. Then the righteous shall answer him, saying, Master, when did we see you hungry, and when we fed and thirsty, and give to drink? So the majority of the sheep did not have a living encounter. They were not historical or chronological contemporaries with Yahshua, so they want to know, when did we do this to you? But the answer is that if you do it to the least of my brethren, then you do it to me. So the moral is that how we treat the microcosm, the least, the lost, the lowly, the humblest, the poorest, the most outcast Christian, how we treat them is an accurate barometer and reflection and measurement of how we treat Yahshua, who is intimately invested in the welfare, and empathetically, he is the high priest who is sympathetic and enters into our pains. So when we do it to them, we do that. And when did we see you sick or in prison, and when come to you? So, they obviously, the sheep are the righteous. They're the righteous ones. And their mystery is, when did we do this to you? We know we did it to others, but when did we do all the things that you just listed as virtues of hospitality? When did we do them to you? And the mystery is going to be answered soon. And the king shall answer and say to you, Truly I say to you, insofar as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. So in the 9th chapter of Acts, the 4th verse, when he arrests Saul of Tarsus on the road, when Saul is en route to arrest Christians, he says, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? Now, it did not enter into Paul's equation that he was persecuting the master himself. He thought he was persecuting the followers, but the master is intimately invested. He knows and experience. He knows everything we're going through. He lives inside of us. So if one of us are hurt, then so too is he. And he enters into our pains and joys much in the same. Also our pains. So we belong to the fellowship of suffering. And how we treat the least. Now, he is a royal Democrat, a king who shares his court with his crown with his court. So if you are the least, no matter how poor, no matter how dejected, no matter how despairing, no matter how rejected and ostracized you may be of the word, if you belong to him, you have a powerful ally. Even when the whole world is your enemy, aligned against you, you have him, and ultimately that's all the protection, and he's a very present help in time of need. He shall then also say to those on the left hand, "Go away from me, accursed ones, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his messengers." Remember, the goats, the hellbound, those are the ones he separates on his left side. This is my left side. This is probably your right side if you're looking in the screen. But the hellbound, they are separated because from the heavenly bound, because they are unworthy to inhabit the same lofty destination as them, and they are accursed because they cursed others, and they are destined for the everlasting fire, that is the lake of fire. And remember, as we explained, the outer darkness in the 30th verse of the review of the material immediately before the material we covered. But everlasting fire, the lake of fire, does burn for all eternity, and the appetites of hell are never satisfied. There is always room for more. And this fire was made necessary. Necessity was the mother of this invention. Much as in colonial America, the early settlers didn't come to build prisons until prisons became necessary. Likewise, the creator of the heavens and the earth did not design hell until it became necessary for Lucifer and Satan and those of his spirits. And so you join, if you follow the devil, if he is your God, and you worship him and covet and love the things that are after him, then you're destined to the same place as his angels. His angels are the demons. They are disembodied as a consequence of, a lot of people think it's for following Lucifer's rebellion, but a careful reading of Genesis 6:1-2 indicates that they had sexually penetrated the human race when they still had bodies, and then they were disembodied after a consequence of that. But the demonic human hybrid, it wasn't a genocide of the human race. It was a genocide of a demonic human hybrid, and the human DNA, the demonic DNA in them is what turned their thoughts and imaginations of their hearts only evil continually. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no food. So they have the opposite of the outreach hospitality of the sheep. The sheep see someone and hungry, and they're in a position to do something, and they do it, The goats have food for themselves, but they don't want to go out of their way or make time. They don't want to be troubled by the inconvenience of giving to those who are in need and in want. So if that they have food and water for themselves is sufficient for themselves, they don't need to worry about anyone else. The homeless, the helpless, the hopeless are not their concern, because they are children and sons of the devil, and they are hellbound accordingly. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in, was naked, and you did not clothe me, sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. So everything that the sheep do, the goats do not do. They do not regard the stranger. They do not go out of their way to make them feel welcome. They do not have empathy or compassion or concern for their plight, dilemma, or situation. And the naked, they probably say it's their own fault. They're the reason they can't have clothes over their back, because they're too lazy to provide for themselves. And the prison, they're there because they deserve to be there. Good people do bad things. Good people do make mistakes. And not everyone who is in prison is a bad person. There is, in fact, a vibrant Christian community in prison, although I have heard a saying that God lives in jail because everyone finds him there, and then when they walk out the door, they leave him right behind, and that's why we have such a high recidivism rate. but we should still be compassionately concerned for people, because prisoners are technically slaves in the United States of America, according to the 13th Amendment, and there are more people in prison per capita in the United States than are, for instance, in Russia or China, totalitarian states. We exceed them in the people we have imprisoned and incarcerated. Then they shall answer him, saying, Master, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not serve you? So they don't see the literal master. They don't see the least, lost, and lowly, and last among them as belonging to him, or reflections of men. Their faith is weak, so, maybe they would have thought twice and acted differently if they saw the master himself. But the master loves all humans, and if we do not love the people he loves, then we cannot be, then our love for him really isn't sufficient. So, they can't compute. They ask the same question. They didn't see his literal physical body there. So all these people who are distressed and in dilemma and in plight and in need and in want and in need of hospitality and service and just love, these are precious to the Messiah, who intimately identifies and empathizes in their plights and situations. Then he shall answer them, saying, Truly I say to you, insofar as you did not do it to the least of these, you did not do it to me. So he says the same thing with an opposite emphasis that he said to the sheep. Same message is communicated. The least among him are an accurate reflection of his, ergo how we treat and handle and manage and coexist with the ostracized, the lowly, the poorest, the sickest, the least popular, the ones who have nothing to offer the world, at least financially and much anything else. They are still an accurate reflection of the master that they have, and how we treat them is a barometer and a standard and a measurement for how we treat the greatest among us, the king, how we treat the lowliest, beggarly peasants in the kingdom. It reflects the concern of the king, who loves us all perfectly and loves us all the same, but will not welcome those who are not loving into his heavenly homeland. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into everlasting life. Two outcomes rooted in two outlooks, and the outlook is one of hospitality and charity and Christian service. The other outlook is selfishness and neglect and indifference and just lack of concern, lack of love. And the outcome for the former is heaven. The outcome for the latter is hell, and rightly and deservedly so. Everlasting punishment. Now we already described that the lake of fire burns for an eternity, but the hellbound do not burn unconsumed, although it is certainly in Elohim's power to burn without consuming, such as, for instance, the theophanic manifestation, which he made himself known to Moses in the 3rd chapter of Exodus, the bush that was burning but did not consume. But it's not consistent with his just nature to allow any sinner, no matter how reprobate, to spend an eternity in burning, but their everlasting punishment. They do not have the resurrected bodies. They are disembodied, and we have company and fellowship and intimate proximity and fellowship and exposure to communities of people, whereas the hellbounds are all alone, no one there, no one to comfort. So moral of the story, be a sheep. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.